dude in a forum is going to say, hey, Shema 777 star will work for me. And just to show you that's proof, that actually is from some instructions on getting a blogging tool called Movable Type, which is written in Perl. These are instructions on how to install it on your OS X server. The instructions that he gives are actually, yeah, please make my library web server documents, which on OS X is a system level thing. It should only be writable by administrators. And the instructions actually say, make that whole thing world writable. It's not just a problem with PHP, I would say, but there are some caveats about that. PHP, why we're discussing it, two reasons. One, it's my particular area of expertise in terms of language, but also it's extremely popular. The vast majority of the tools of the web apps that we're talking about, I would say the vast majority of open source web app development right now is being done in PHP, and I would say it's probably going to be for the foreseeable future. I would say that PHP in and of itself is not necessarily insecure, and it's very accessible and very powerful, and that has attracted it. For a lot of folks, it makes it attractive. It means it drives a lot of popular web applications. It provides a lot of features out of the box. Sometimes a lot of those features, it's hard to necessarily account for all of them. PHP has, instead of doing things like forcing a user to include libraries out of the box to say, okay, I need to include my file IO library or my graphics library here, generally those things just come that are open to the environment all the time. So all of your functionality is available to you all the time. There are some features that have been put in PHP historically that have been problematic. The register globals feature, which automatically converts incoming data into a variable in the script level area, that has often proven to be a real problem. Allow URL fopen. What that does is that it lets you use the file IO functions to access things over HTTP or FTP, things like that. That has often proven to be something that people have exploited. PHP is loosely typed, and that has sometimes been confusing. It gets especially confusing when you're dealing with input validation, things like that. And it does not have any kind of taint mode. Tainting is something that exists in Perl. It's something I know you can turn on in Ruby. I don't know that it's on by default. But basically, if you're not familiar with it, a taint mode in a language, basically the interpreter takes a look at where certain data is coming from and doesn't let you do anything with that data until you validated it. You basically have to do some kind of check and manually say, yes, this matches how I want to use it. Now untaint it and pass it through that, and then you can use it. But you can't do it without that, so it forces the programmer to be very aware of where it's coming from. PHP currently doesn't have any kind of tainting mode in it. There's been some research that's gone into that, but nothing has been incorporated into the core language yet. We're just going to talk about some common types of web attacks. These are the basic 5 ones that we're going to be dealing with. Spoof form submissions and HTTP requests are basically kind of the same thing. HTTP requests are basically a more complex version of it. Cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, SQL injections, and code injections. A spoof form submission, what that is it's basically sending some kind of arbitrary data to a script via manipulated HTML forms. It would be the case. Usually, the way that works is they can do a couple different things. If the HTML form is using the get method, then that's actually passed on the URL, and you can see a picture down here at the bottom. I hope you can kind of see it. Basically, it actually shows up in the URL as certain values that are passed along to it. Like in this example, it has a product ID and then the amount. Well, the amount might, if it's getting passed via get, might show up as 1, where you could change that to 1,000. Or God forbid somebody does something like passes like the price of an item over get, well, and it shows like $10, where you could change that to $1 or something like that. Those are things that hopefully anybody who knows what they're doing would catch, but you'd be surprised. It's slightly more difficult with post methods. With post, it doesn't show up in the URLs, so it's more difficult in the sense that somebody just has to save out the HTML markup, do some slight modifications to it, and then send it. Anybody with an HTML for Dummies book can do that kind of thing. I mean, the basics of it, though, is that you can't expect that a user is going to utilize the form that you generate in the way that you expect them to. And that is something that, unfortunately, a lot of web developers miss. Spoofed HTTP requests are basically a more powerful form of form spoofing. It's less convenient, sort of. You kind of need to know what you're doing, kind of. Generally, it's going to require some kind of tool like wget or curl. Those are two different Unix programs that allow you to interact with stuff on the command line, interact with HTTP stuff on the command line. Or if you're really cool, you can just telnet to port 80 and just type stuff in. It's also pretty easy to write scripts that do these kinds of things with libraries like pairs, HTTP request. Pair is a repository for PHP libraries. HTTP request is a library that lets you do HTTP requests very easily. And the example here just shows you how to retrieve a cookie from a site. Make a request, get the response, show the cookies. It's really simple to do those kinds of things. So there's just isn't much difficulty in working with HTTP requests, and they're more powerful because you just have a lot more flexibility. You can work with the full gamut of HTTP to do different stuff to your scripts. Cross-site scripting is another kind of, and I'm not sure if I'd say it's the most common, but it's one of the most common attacks. Basically what it is that you're figuring out some way to inject content into a site. Usually it's client-side scripting. And it's usually used to steal cookie data because the client-side scripting stuff, like JavaScript, VBScript, and IE, those are the two main things, usually JavaScript, because that's going to work with everything. Basically what you do is you work with some application that hasn't done enough validation to strip out client-side scripting. And an example here would be somebody is running a guest book on their site, and somebody submits something that says, "Hey, dude, how you doing?" And inside this thing that they submit to the guest book, they put in a basic script markup. This here, location replace, that sends it to whoever Rick's page is, and then just passes as a value to some script that he's got on there the whole document cookie. Well, that's the whole cookie that was on that guest site, the guest book site's page. And it can get, that's a pretty simple example, but it's difficult to it's difficult to catch every situation where somebody might inject scripting unless you just remove it outright. We'll get to that in a little bit. But basically, again, the idea is that you're injecting some kind of stuff that's going to then get executed on the client when the person views a page, and then steal cookie data, things like that, which is one of the reasons why it's a really bad idea to put important stuff inside the cookie. Cross-site request forgeries. These are sort of the opposite of cross-site scripting things. Basically, the way these things are usually set up is you set the source attribute for an image tag, where in HTML somebody sets up an image there and you have a source attribute, SRC. That gives the person the address for where to get the image from. Basically, you set up and you pass an image tag in, you set the source attribute to a script that's on another site. One thing is that this only works with get method forms, but basically the idea here is that you inject that to get it to trigger some kind of action via get on another site.